Hello, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform, and a real honor to have two of the most recognized HCM market watchers, influencers, analysts, executives, Meg Bear from SAP and Trish Steed. And I'll let them introduce themselves as we kick it off. But they're going to talk about a lot of different things related to the present and future of work. Okay, Meg, introduce yourself, and then Trish, and we can jump into it. It's going to be a lively session.
Yes, well, first off, thank you for having us, Vinnie. This is super exciting. Meg Bear, President and Chief Product Officer for SAP SuccessFactors, longtime veteran in enterprise software. And I'm coming up on almost finishing 4 years here at SuccessFactors. So very excited to get a chance to talk to you, Vinnie.
And what would you know about future of work in HCM, Meg? I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
Trish?
Hi, thank you for having me, Vinny, and I'm glad to be on with good friend Meg Bear, who I've known for a very long time. I'm Trish Steed, and I have been an HR practitioner for about 20 years before I moved over to the analyst ranks. I've been writing about HR and very passionately in a true dorky way around all things about work and workplaces for a very long time, and a co-founder of H3HR Advisors, and we do both advisory work in the HCM space, mainly with vendors, and trying to talk about what the future of work holds for all of the organizations that are out there. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to talk about some of those new things coming around.
Let me start with you, Trish. So it's a little surreal, isn't it? 3 years ago, most executives are bragging about, oh my God, it took a lot of effort, but everybody moved to work from home. It was reasonably smooth. And now it's complete flip around where we're saying we're going to meter people who don't show up to work, right? What happened to the concept of hybrid workplaces? It just seems like we turned a switch on and then turned it off again. What are you seeing?
You know, I'm hearing that. I will say I was recently with my parents and watching just the regular, news, and it seems like a lot of the lead stories are all about, employers that are just completely abandoning their work from home or even a hybrid model, IBM, Yahoo, Best Buy, you name it, right? There's lots of companies doing this, but I wonder, we haven't really seen data yet that proves out that that is happening in a majority of the organizations. So I think while that might be a little bit of the big story we're hearing, I'm just not seeing that play out in reality just yet. So I don't want everyone to panic. If anything, I would say if you're still doing hybrid work, or maybe you're just starting to really do hybrid work in your organization, it's probably worth just kind of staying the course and figuring out what's going to work best for the type of work that you have and the type of employees you have, right? There are many jobs where, you have to be in retail, maybe hospitality, where healthcare, where you have to be on site.
Any blue collar job, any trade job
Right.
require being on
That's
premise.
right.
Yeah.
But I looked back, I actually went, when talking about this or thinking about this, I went to Pew Research, and in pre-pandemic, we only had about 23% of people working remotely, right? And this is something that as a Gen Xer, we've wanted this my whole life, my whole career, I've been wanting this, right? And by October 2020, the number was up to 71% working from home. By January of 2022, it was down to about 59. So I guess that being said, I think my desire and what I'm hoping plays out is that yes, it might still shrink back a little bit more from that, January 2022 number, but I hope that it's better than it was pre-pandemic, because I don't think it's just about all of a sudden ripping off a bandage, because I think that's what COVID did for all of us. We had to do that. We had no choice. And when people feel like they don't have a choice, they want to revert back to what they had before that they know works. And I think that's what we're experiencing. So I guess if I'm in an organization out there, I'm thinking, you know what, I don't want to just automatically jump back to the way it was. I want to actually take a pause and see, are my people more productive work from home? Are they more productive in a hybrid way? And really, to me, it also comes down to, can we retain our workers? And I think if we just go all the way back to the way it was before, you're going to lose your workforce, or a good chunk of them. So,
I'm sure you have a perspective.
yeah.
Yeah, and my perspective is both kind of what does it mean for me as an global organization leader here at SAP, and what does it look like here, and also what does it look like for all of my 9,000 customers who are leaders in their space trying to navigate this. And of course, there's kind of two forces, and I think Trish hit a lot of that really solidly. One is initially the thesis was we can't do roles from home. And of course, the pandemic disproved that for a large number, probably more than we expected, of roles and of businesses that could do things remotely. And so then it moved away from what can we do to what should we do. And I do believe that here is a moment where leading companies are getting much more data driven about how they're thinking about this. And what we've learned in these years is that there are some things that are really improved by hybrid work, by remote work, productivity, agency, reducing commute, reducing pollution, all of those things. And then there's some things that have been harmed: connection, new early talent, getting opportunity to learn from others, learning, kind of the what it is for a workplace culture and how do we build up loose ties. And so I think what we're really feeling here is certainly a bit of a power dynamic of, hey, who's in control and who has a say? Is it me? Is it the company or not? And I think that will continue. And a lot of people point to generational shifts, but I do think this is a human nature shift. None of us like agency taken away from us. And so people want to have a voice in that. But also, hopefully, there's a little bit of a conversation of what is good for not just productivity, but well-being, mental health, connection, and overall culture of an organization. And that's where you get the hybrid.
And commute times, right? In major cities. I mean, a lot of people have family issues. Let me tell you my experience. So I was one of Gartner's very first remote analysts, 1995. Not because Gartner was visionary, right? They wanted to expand into a certain area, application area. As it turned out, most of us were not in Stanford or in New York, and none of us wanted to move to Stanford. So they grudgingly, my offer letter said, okay, you will move to Atlanta at the end of the year, within 12 months, right? So with a contingent offer. And I said, Atlanta is a little more sellable. But for the first year, I commuted almost every week to headquarters, right? And I recently wrote about it. The reason it worked was Gartner had all kinds of metrics for that particular role. How many queries you handle, how many pages of new research you've written, how many slides you created that are new presentations, how many presentations you were doing. They were metric crazy. So at the end of 6 months, they could actually see, man, this guy and the whole cohort was off the charts. So I got a call, 6 months review, and I said, my God, should I tell them now the Atlanta home visits aren't going too well? I said, well, if he raises it, I will. And he goes, Vinnie, how's hunting going? And I go, can I be honest with you? It's not going well. My wife is getting more and more depressed. He goes, I'm glad you said that, because I can use the relocation budget somewhere else. Stay put. But so, to their credit, they looked at the data and they said, this thing can be done from anywhere, so long as you have a diligent worker who doesn't need to be around colleagues all the time and so on. Okay. I had gone to Gartner from Pricewaterhouse, like you, Trish.
Mm-hmm.
The culture was, you got to go meet the client in person.
That's right.
Drop everything, fly, whatever it takes, and be there, right? So I've done both of those, and I've basically adopted the principle of Nike, just do it, and then I add in FFS, which is, guys, work's got to be done. Quit bickering. Bosses who are egotistical about it, be a little flexible, and employees, quit the BS, guys. Just get it done, whatever. I can work in a Starbucks, I can work in an aisle seat, I can work in a hotel. I've done all of the above, okay? You're younger than me, you can do it anywhere. So I'm a little impatient with this whole, back and forth we're going through. Just get it done, guys. So anyway, let's move on to the next topic. Meg, the little exciting thing called generative AI.
Just a little thing.
Just a little thing. I cannot, you and I, all of us have been in the industry a long time. I cannot remember a technology buzzword that has created so much excitement and so much fear as Gen AI. So tell me from an SAP perspective and your broader perspective, is this real? How is it going to affect the HCM function?
So absolutely, I believe it's real, and absolutely it's going to impact HCM, and I would say, just business in general and work in general. I do recognize that that there is, an overabundance of enthusiasm and fear and uncertainty, and that I have a theory that the way people react to that is much more about themselves than it is about the thing itself. And so we have an outsized opportunity, and we have a series of reactions ranging from panic to hyper enthusiasm, and somewhere in between those things is probably where we all should live. But as I think about where are the opportunities, because I think that's the first thing that we should all look to is where are the opportunities, and then what are the guardrails we want to put on there. We had some great announcements at Sapphire where we talked about our partnerships with Microsoft. We talk about partnerships with Google and IBM, and I think SAP is in a really great position to really leverage the broader innovation that's happening in the ecosystem, and then bring it together to apply it to our customers who also need a lot of clarity of compliance and oversight of ethics and all of those things that we take quite seriously at a company like SAP serving global customers. But one of the things that I think is most important to remember as it relates, at least from my perspective, for the next 3 years or so with where we're going to see innovation is I really am deeply committed that we're focusing that innovation on how does it help each of us, each individual, as well as serving the larger organizational need. And so, if you think about technology, we've very much been about automation, and that's driven a lot of growth, that's driven a lot of productivity improvements, et cetera. And that's from the Industrial Revolution up until now. But AI is really about augmentation of what we as humans can do. And as a result, it is the value drivers are not just organization value, although organizations will benefit, but it's individual value, because it actually makes a more equitable situation where I can participate and contribute and get value from these tools to help me as well as to help me get my job done. And I think that's really why it's both scary and exciting, because it's really signaling very clearly that work will change, how our jobs, how we spend our day is going to change. And I think that creates real opportunities for each of us to kind of reimagine how we bring value to work and how work brings value to us.
I wrote a book on automation 7 years ago. And this is when Oxford had come up with the analysis that 44% of US jobs were susceptible. And Gardner had this thing about 25% of all IT jobs would disappear and so on. Well, crazy forecasts, right? So I looked at 100 years of automation, UPC codes in groceries, self-driving as in cruise control in cars, ATM machines, and so on. What I found is every one of those technologies took 30, 40, 50 years to become mainstream, right? Society has a way of compensating for all the hype that those technologies come up with and go, we'll see. But to your point, it does augment human performance. I found so many examples like UPS with all the telematics. They have several drivers who have driven 1 million miles without an accident. You can't do that without technology. I mean, you and I couldn't do it without technology. So like you, I'm looking forward to us becoming more productive rather than all the fear factors going to eliminate jobs. Trish, I'm sure you don't have an opinion on Gen AI.
Yeah, not at all. No, I'm glad, Vinny, that you mentioned that things like this take time, right? So it is exciting. The one thing I think that time gives you is it gives you more context and ways of hearing how other people are starting to use whatever the technology. I can remember, just as you were talking, it kind of struck me like I remember, I guess about 2010, I was trying to get the hospital I was working in to use QR codes to help the children. It was a children's hospital to help their parents find their way to different portions of the hospital. And I was told, no one's ever going to use QR codes, Trish. And yet here we are after a pandemic, and my goodness, you can't go anywhere, right, without a QR code. I just got a dog tag for my dog with QR code on it, right? So I think you're right, Vinny. I think that you have to wait for sort of mainstream people, right, to accept and understand how whatever the technology is will work for them. I view it as a way to empower people. I view it a way, from an HR perspective, to be able to just do some of the things that, HR teams don't have time to do, right? I can give you probably two good examples I thought of right off the top of the bat was, I've been in positions before where I was going to give a presentation, and then I thought, oh my gosh, if I had only had a slide that had this little bit of information, but I didn't have time to go Google it and find articles and sift through things. And what I would do in that instance, and probably still before this generative AI, I would go out on Twitter and tweet out to the people and say, does anyone have this? And then people would send me what they had, right? So it was pretty fast. If I had generative AI and I could just quickly put that in, copy paste it into a presentation, right? So I think you have to learn the context of the information and then how do you apply it in a way that's effective for you. I think the other thing is, like, if you're going in maybe to try and talk to your CEO, your CFO about a topic, doesn't even matter what the topic, right? If you need data, stats, whatever, instead of, again, Googling, sifting and sorting through
Just be
many
careful.
articles.
If you decide to get into law, be careful having Gen I create these citations for you. There's a
Well, I don't mean legally. I mean just in general, right? Well, look, it's only as good as the information that it's drawing from, right? Like right now, it only goes up to, I believe, 2021, right? So you have to be a little bit careful. But as a brainstorming tool, as a tool just to back up what you're thinking about, give you a basis to start from, I think it's quite
here's
good.
what I worry about in the enterprise. I don't think we have enough data in people's clouds, right? Google and Amazon and so on have collected so many voicemail messages and photos and so on, billions. In the enterprise, Meg, a lot of enterprise vendors don't have much in their clouds. Most of it is on-premise, locked up in proprietary data centers. And then those that have it in the cloud, they don't have permissions, right? Enterprises tend to be pretty fussy about their data compared to us consumers. So I worry a little bit that I'm not seeing enough of that honesty come through and say, guys, this is going to be, this is going to take some time. So anyways, but let's not dampen the enthusiasm for now. Why don't we talk about another major technology announcement that came out last week? Apple announced its mixed reality Vision Pro product. Should we be excited in the enterprise, or is it going to be more of a consumer toy gizmo? Trish, what do you think?
I think it's much like the topic we just covered. I think it's exciting that the capabilities are there. I feel like it's very, very early days. I currently use the sort of a cheaper competitor, the MetaQuest 2, but I'm using it for business. So I can see that there are applications, right? So I do probably 50% of my meetings in virtual reality. I actually use it for personal as well, for exercise, for gaming, right? So I remember when my kids went away to college, you can, do a FaceTime with someone and have that, or a Zoom and have that like we're doing now, right? It's a very flat sort of experience. The first time I went into virtual reality and visited with my son, who was several states away, and it was like he was right there and he like reached out and hugged me, I just started bawling. So I think there are uses for it. I think that as I really thought about how I use it for business, and I think it would be the same with this new Apple version, one thing I found is that people, if you're on a Zoom call, for example, maybe not in the way we're doing it, right, as a recording, but just in a meeting, a Zoom meeting, you could be doing 20 other things and people won't know. If you're in virtual reality any movement you make with your hands, I'm like moving my hands now, any movement you make is picked up on. And so when I am meeting with people in virtual reality, they seem to be more physically engaged in what we're doing the entire time. So again, very early days in my opinion. I think there are probably many ways to use it in the enterprise, and I just don't think we have maybe the context yet, which is why we have people like Meg sort of dreaming up how that's going to play out in terms of for our workforce.
Meg's got the fun job. She's gonna find enterprise use cases for it.
That's right.
Yeah, I actually think so. One of the things that I'm liking about the direction Apple is taking, and I've also, sort of played around with VR mostly for just fun and games. But where Apple is
Meg, I
going.
find it hard to believe that you have time for fun.
Oh, Vinnie, being with me is
Meg, you just said you're not fun.
Fair point. But what I love about where Apple is going with this, and I think it's really got legs, is the focusing less on the metaverse and the kind of avatar interface, and focusing more on what we're getting used to with a Teams interface, and thinking in terms of, so what I really love is the kind of, if you think about using this to change what you use a screen for, any kind of screen, whether it's a small screen, a big screen, a television screen, and to have the ability to sort of adjust between those two, I think that's truly inspired. I think the way that it creates better clarity of your current environment with your virtual environment, as opposed to one or the other, for somebody that has vertigo and also, just gets creeped out a little bit, I think that is really, really inspired. And I think it gives us a chance to kind of open up. So the way I see it is that I think Apple is getting much closer to something that people will find valuable for work. I think it really opens up some interesting things with this hybrid discussion we've been having, that, hey, would this be a cheaper thing to invest in than physical facilities, and could you build that connection? I think it has some risk that we still spend more time virtual and less time in real life. But I think when you're dealing with global teams, and it's not easy to get to Shanghai right now, even though it's open again, there's not that many flights and it's really expensive. It would be nice to be kind of part of the team in a more sort of visceral way. So I think we're getting really much closer. I think we're still in an interim awkward middle school phase, but you can see that there's some pretty interesting breakthroughs. And I think the physical form of how we work with technology, I think Apple is really opening our eyes that it's very limiting, and there's some interesting ideas that we could break through on that. And that, I think, is exciting.
So in the last week, I was thinking about use cases, personal and professional, right? So the three biggest use cases personally I came up with were, I'd love to use this as a big IMAX theater, personal IMAX theater, right? You can basically do that, and suddenly the screen becomes bigger and bigger. The second thing is, I'd like it as a heads-up display in a car. Okay, can you imagine all the data you would have in front of you on your windscreen? And the third one is flight companion. I mean, if I could take that on a flight, it'd be like being on Emirates Air, right? Connected all the time. So those were three personal ones. From a professional perspective, Trish, what you said, the collaboration would be much more, almost not quite physically right there, but closer and closer to that. What Meg you said. I think onboarding could be a great use case, right? Where you don't have to necessarily be next to a person and show them what to do. And field service support is going to be a major one. So my big concern is eye fatigue. In fact, it's funny, along with an announcement, they also announced health iOS in iOS 17. And a new feature is digital eye strain. Okay, so obviously Apple is aware of it. I just don't know. I mean, having come through 3 years of doing so many of these video episodes, I'm not sure. That thing is just so powerful, right? That, anyways, let's not again put more dampen enthusiasm about it. Let's talk about how HCM is changing. So Meg, it's almost like another switch went off, right? A year ago, we were all about DEI and employee experience. We were trying to pamper the employee every which way to Sunday. Now it seems like we're back to productivity. We're back to, more realistic stuff. Okay. Is that just me? Are you seeing that in your customer base? Why this sudden?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would use the language more realistic, but I do agree with your thesis that, we are seeing a natural tension between voice of the employee versus voice of the shareholder, right? And that is to be expected. And you can fully understand that depending on what the macro conditions are, each of those voices has more currency or less. It's no different than any other economic condition. But I think when it comes to the DEI topic, I actually am much more optimistic and also really, really excited about where we're going with this, because I agree with you that early days when we were talking about DEI, it was mostly vanity metrics and a whole lot of, a bit of saying like, oh, I'm interested in this as well, but not a lot of real evidence or real focus. And I think we have moved pretty strongly as an industry that everybody, like, just talking about the fact that you care about diversity is not actually moving the needle. We're moving much more to talk about things like fair pay transparency, actual reporting of your expectations and progress towards an equitable workplace, and then talking a lot more about what is the lived experience of belonging and inclusion within your workforce, and are you creating opportunities for all? And I think this matters, and it doesn't just matter in a feel-good way. I think, and it doesn't just matter in an economic way. It matters because the demographics are shifting, and it matters because the world is shifting. And if we think that we can take a very limited set of data focused on one set of majorities or a couple sets of majorities and build long-term sustained shareholder value with that, we're probably at risk of other organizations that don't have that belief. And so I think we're growing up as an organization, as a culture. I think it comes with tension, and I recognize that tension is across multiple dimensions. But at the end of the day, I am personally optimistic, and certainly for the future that I want to see, that we're getting realistic. It's not about what you're saying, it's about what you're doing.
So Meg, you said voice of the employee, the voice of the shareholder. Actually, you're also getting the voice of the consumer. I think the consumer has been neglected the last few years. So the recent focus on Bud Light and Target and so on is like, guys, we've been listening too much to our almost younger employees, what their views are. We need to be careful and not, superimpose that on that of the consumer. We got to be a little careful. So, Trish, what are you seeing in this?
I agree with really everything Meg is saying. And I think when you look at productivity, I think it just scares me a little bit that we don't think of it as an outcome in terms of which levers are we pushing or pulling in order to get to that as an outcome. And we're like now shifting that back to being the main focus. So I would just caution that I think we do need to focus on some of those things. Pre-pandemic, and I've heard Meg speak about this, in fact, pre-pandemic, but belonging and inclusion were really making some true meaningful headway in organizations, where it wasn't just about having a checklist to decide if you were going to, have a diversity, equity, inclusion program, for example. We were really making some progressive steps. I think that earlier when Meg was talking about, with work from home, one of the things that it negatively impacted was our ability to feel connected and to feel close to our colleagues. And I feel like that's when the inclusion and belonging piece also took the hit. So much of the progress we might have made 2 or 3 years pre-pandemic was kind of either stalled or even hurt with that. And so I hope that we're careful not to just continue that negative progress, I'm going to call it, and just think about it. I know that Deloitte had done a study not too long ago, and they were talking about, in terms of productivity, it's really, they're finding more important to focus on the effectiveness of the individual, the efficiency of the individual, and then the ability to give them autonomy and empowering them to make decisions. And so whether that's within your workplace and you're seeing productivity as your outcome there, or whether it's in a hybrid situation, it's much about personalization and paying attention to what each person needs, if you can. And I think that's where, Meg, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I do feel like I've heard a lot of that from SAP and SuccessFactors in terms of paying attention to personalization as a way to include people or help them feel like they belong, with the good outcome of then being more productive. Am I interpreting that right? Or
yeah, but I would add one other layer to that, and that is to create opportunity. I mean, at the end of the day, what we need, what the world needs, what business needs, what the economy needs is to accelerate the pace of skill development, because without that, we know we're going to run into a growth challenge. And so again, creating a set of conditions that people can develop skills, grow, and have opportunities, and to make sure that set of conditions is equitable, making sure that set of conditions is inclusive of as many people as possible, or else you're not going to get there, right? And at the end of the day, this whole belonging thing is not a touchy-feely thing. If you do not feel psychologically safe or comfortable or able to do your job, you're not going to do as good of a job. And you're certainly not going to be able to take the kind of risks to learn something new. And so again, if what we need as a global workforce is to get our act together and upskill ourselves so that we can survive this AI thing and create the kind of value that we need to create, we need to figure out how to make that available to as many people as possible. And we need to figure out what's getting in our way of that. And this is where I think data becomes really helpful. And I think this is where getting more serious about the data that we track, about the outcomes that we drive, and about the results that we're trying to create. And again, these are not feel-good results. These are shareholder value results. And thinking about because most people's P&L, employment is one of the biggest costs on any P&L. If you're paying people to work for you and you're not equipping them to do their best work, you're not going to be getting the results you need and the return on investment that you're paying.
Ladies, we have solved several problems in about a half an hour. I think we should go to Washington, D.C. What do you think?
I'm with you.
We're right there.
Any final thoughts?
Well, first off, again, thank you for having us. Final thoughts is, I think the future involves a lot of change, but I think that there's an opportunity for all of that change to really help, not just the global needs, but each of us individually. So I encourage us all to use some optimism and be pragmatic, but use some optimism to ask ourselves, how can this help us?
Thank you, Meg. Trish?
I would just encourage anyone listening, be curious, whether that is around, the things we've talked about in the workplace. Don't always just be a naysayer. I think there's a lot of that, and it's sometimes contagious. So just be curious.
Leave that to the analysts.
Right, that's right. That's what we're here for. Trust us. We're hearing all sides of a situation, right? But I don't know. I'm an optimist at heart, and so I do like to think that, when Vinnie, you mentioned earlier, it takes a long time for things in the work world to manifest and to take hold and take root. I've seen that in my career. I know you both have seen it in your career. And I just say, we're in this for the long haul, right? So be curious about what's coming up. Start thinking about, I might not use this in my workplace today. How might I be using it in 10 years? things are possible. And talk to young people. Don't let them take over, right? Like Vinnie was saying, we don't want to just make that shift, but talk to the younger workers as well and find out they might be using tools or opportunities different than, you know, those of us who might have been working for quite a while. So be curious.
You know, on the young people, when I tell them about my Gartner experience, they think back and they go, "How old were you?" And I, lie about that. But the fact is, we, I mean, we have a lot of experience, all of us, and we were young once. So, I mean, it'd be nice for younger employees to listen to us every once in a while.
Right. Well, do you think, Vinnie, because I mean, you and I were both in Price Waterhouse, I feel like, that was a time where when you were young, you wanted people to listen to you, but they weren't for the most part, right? And so, but now it's sort of like, I feel like, well, it's my turn to be listened to, but then I'm also bright enough to know I didn't feel heard when I was 27, 28, 29, right? And maybe it's finding a better balance of that.
We
So
need to
you're
come
both,
back. We need to come back on that very topic.
yes,
Generational communication issue.
Yes. Yes.
I agree.
Thank you so much. This was
Thank you,
great.
Vinnie.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, guys. Bye-bye.